It requires a decent home and the chance to find a job and the opportunity to escape from the clutches of poverty. Of course, people cannot contribute to the nation if they are never taught to read or write, if their bodies are stunted from hunger, if their sickness goes untended, if their life is spent in hopeless poverty, just drawing a welfare check. So we want to open the gates to opportunity. But we're also going to give all our people, black and white, the help that they need to walk through those gates.
15 years ago, me and my mother were homeless, living pillow to post. Anybody who would let us live with them, family members, friends, it wouldn't last long. We eventually had to move into a homeless shelter where my mother completed a program that eventually rewarded her with a Section 8 voucher. And since then, about 2003 or 4, we have been living with Section 8. I don't see my mother getting off this assistance anytime soon. It's sad. It hurts me to see her so dependent on this. Like there's no way out.
All this public housing around the country that needed fixing up. And so they looked and said, what are we going to do? We don't have, Congress won't give us the money. And so they said, well, let's turn to the private sector. So they turned to investors and they said, look at the value of this housing, the buildings isn't worth that much, but the rents that are going to keep coming in are worth some money. So they got the investors to basically look at how they might put money into the property. So the private sector coming in sounds good, right? Because you're like, oh, well, that doesn't take the taxpayer money. But one of the concerns is that the rules for those investors are that they want to make sure that they're going to get a good return on their investment. So they want to make sure that you're the right person living there. So they don't want to have people who are difficult, or they don't want to have people who have are not working. And so suddenly now we have a solution to the federal cutback problem by getting private investors to invest, but now there's rules that are even stricter for who can live there.
We have been part of the HUD's Plan for Transformation program since the year 2000, and since that time our focal point is trying to help build communities that have been disinvested in over the years. So our focus oftentimes is just trying to get key stakeholders and bringing people to the table that can help us with our mission. And our mission is to not only build housing, but to build the capacity of families and folks in the communities that we develop in. One of the advantages that we have, and what I do here at CHA as a development guy, is that I focus on trying to build mixed income developments. So the new model for doing subsidized and supportive housing has changed dramatically from what it was, say, 20 years ago.
We could really fix up these neighborhoods and reduce crime, make these neighborhoods a lot safer, make them nicer. But it's almost as if we're working again. The city and CHA are working against us. We inherited a house on the south side, and we ended up fixing it up. It was the most beautiful house on the block. But 3 or 4 years ago, before we got it, there was a fine from the city for long grass. And we had never received it because it was from an owner from about 3 years ago. Now our house was the most beautiful house on the block after we fixed it. We cleaned up all the brick, we cleaned up the yard, and the city, because of this $250 fine, tore our house down. They just completely knocked it down one day. And the registration of the house wasn't up to date, so they didn't have us as the new owners. Their excuse was they tried to notify somebody, but they went and knocked the most beautiful house on the block down. Completely renovated, ready for a CHA tenant. And a lot of times I feel the city and CHA are just checking boxes as opposed to really looking past and looking at what we did. We beautified the neighborhood one house at a time, but unfortunately now it's a vacant lot.
Now the need for subsidized housing, it's available for those who, until they can get their incomes to a level where they can live in market rate housing.
I wanted to initially get the home ownership program, but I don't hold on to a job long enough. Job stability is my problem. By the time that it's time to do my yearly, I'm either not at that job or at another job receiving under, so I don't meet those qualifications. So sometimes it's barriers in place that are set up for us that makes it hard, but that comes with the bureaucracy. When you are receiving government assistance, they set out these barriers that they put in place that you have to abide by to meet the guidelines to participate or receive the funding or whatever.
So after living there for a few years, I gave up the low income and decided that my income was increasing at the time. And when your income increases in low income, your rent goes up as well. So I felt like, why should I pay that certain amount of money to live in that sort of environment?
The way public housing or subsidized housing works is you pay 30% of your income for rent. Well, if you earn $100, you pay $30. If you earn $1,000, you pay $300. So it's always this feeling of like, well, in that framework, I'm going to always be paying more as I earn more, and I'm going to get as much. I don't see much return on my effort. And so the frustration, they felt frustrated with that because they felt like, I want to do better, I want to earn more, but I'm not earning enough still to actually get out of the living in public housing. What you see is when people start earning enough where the rent they're paying in public housing is what they would pay living out in the market, that's when people start to think, well, I should move. However, the reason they often don't and pay like almost market rate is because they realize that their job or their work situation is unstable.
I did not know, I'm sorry, if my child or myself want to go to a city college, that you can get, basically it's not advertised. I didn't know that they give you $1,500 towards your scholarship or tuition. It's not advertised for recipients to know. They send out newsletters regarding the COAT program. They sent out memos regarding who's the new liaison, and the chief official wants to write a letter and he sends out an announcement, and did you know, or something like this. They send emails about like little highlights that are going on. So I think over the past couple of years since when I was working there, they have expanded. But if a person does not have their eyes open to it, where they can receive these resources and really take the time to look for them, and dealing with their day-to-day life, then you would not know about them. But they don't make them as privy. Like, I wasn't aware that they had vouchers for the kids, and when the vouchers are released, it's not like they call out like they do when they get ready to inspect your unit. They don't send notices out. They could send a courtesy notice out, okay, the voucher's going to be ready for spring this day, the voucher's going to be ready for summer this day.
For one thing, I didn't know about it. When you're young and somebody's telling you, oh, you should fill out for low income because you can get your own place and you don't pay that much rent. So to a young teen or a young adult, that's exciting. Oh my God, I'm going to get my own place. I can do whatever I want. I can go and come as I please. So you don't think about the job programs or the school programs at the time. You're just thinking about, oh my God, I'm going to get my own apartment. I can go and come as I please, especially when you're coming from your parents' house and you're moving into your own apartment. That's the only thing you're thinking about. You're not thinking about furthering your education or getting a job. You're just looking at the fact that this is low income housing. They're going to go according to my income. I can afford to live there and pay a little bit of money. That's the only thing you think about.
We focus on the up-and-coming population.
Right.
So we are focused on trying to help the young people in the household to make the change. Because many times grandparents or folks are elderly, or folks, single moms, are just trying to take care of their babies. But what we know is that the situation's going to change for the kids. The mother might end up, she might have been on public housing for 2 or 3 decades, but the children, as they get older, don't have to.
I didn't know what it was for a long time. And for a while, I think at the age of 9 or 10, I was like, oh, well, my mom has Section 8, so I'm gonna be on Section 8. And that was the most ignorant thing I could have said as a 9-year-old. That because this is what I see, this is what I see, this is what I'm gonna become. Give a man a fish and you'll feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish and you'll feed him for a lifetime. That's why people become stuck, because they're only looking about the now. They're only looking at right now. They're not looking at the long-term effects of staying on CHA. Because in the end, you have to stay in a specific tax bracket. You have to make a specific amount of money. You have to stay in a specific income bracket for you to even keep this assistance. So you become stagnated in your mind. You become poverty. People end up having a poverty-stricken mindset because they feel like they can't go any further. If you have, instead of just giving them what they need, you need to teach. People need to be taught how to get it on their own and keep it, because that's a problem. A lot of people don't know how to keep things.
One difference that we can make, right, as a society will be to move towards a focus on like economic security, for all Americans. Because like right now we talk about security as let's spend some money on police or private security forces to basically manage people who have to do crimes to survive, right? I think that the problem you're talking about with public housing, the underlying problem is people not having the means to sustain themselves, right? Or living in a city where, the housing costs are through the roof, and there's all of this government support, because that's the other thing, right? Keep in mind the government support for rent intensifying developments, right? So like, for instance, the use of TIF money throughout the city of Chicago to finance private buildings, private companies, whether it's a Mariano's grocery store or a Whole Foods or some other kind of marquee development that's going to change the landscape, right? And create a situation where poor people couldn't live there anyway, let alone shop there. So that's happening throughout the city, right? Rahm Emanuel and a lot of these aldermen supporting projects that spur economic development, whether it's building condos or other things around the city, but that also puts pressure on the real estate markets, right? Where people who are trying to find low-income housing are being pushed farther and farther out.
The whole focal point for me with CHA and Section 8 is you have to go into this situation very open-minded, and you have to set goals each year. You can't get complacent, because this system can make you complacent.
Well, I think, fundamentally, what we could look to in other countries, for example, other countries have been doing the same thing, where they've been trying to rebuild their public housing. The quality wasn't good. They wanted to also move towards mixed income, models that we see here in the United States. But for England, for example, what they do is, instead of moving people out and then building the housing, what they would do is they'd find a way to build the housing first and then move people into it. And so it's that order of operation, I think, is important to think about. I would also say that they would have to do a lot more to really address the larger problems that are outside of public housing. And I'm not saying that Chicago Housing Authority or any housing authority really could change that. So if, for example, racial segregation is a huge problem in Chicago in terms of where people can and cannot live. So if they're really concerned about giving people real choice and real opportunity, acknowledge, first of all, that that's a problem, and then say, okay, how can we help you better? Now, they've improved on that, but they didn't start that way. So I think there's things about kind of addressing those concerns. I would also say that they should consider other things when they start looking at where people are going to move to. And again, they're starting to think about that, recognizing schools and all those opportunities. So all those things that make a good neighborhood. They talk about opportunity neighborhoods, but when you look at them, it doesn't really acknowledge like how Chicago public schools work right now. Just because you could live next to North Lawndale College Prep doesn't mean you can necessarily go there, right? Everyone has to, you have like schools that have select enrollment. They may be right there in your neighborhood and you can live right next to it, but you can't attend it. And so I think that's the one thing that they had to they hadn't really thought about how CPS operates. So especially because there was a lot of families with kids.
So we want to open the gates to opportunity. But we're also going to give all our people, black and white, the help that they need to walk through those gates.